Thank you. Michael Feinstein?
So I'm here to speak in support of the staff recommendation for heights for the opportunity sites of the 120 to 135, not because I necessarily support those heights ultimately for those sites, but I think it's a good compromise between the portion of the community who wants to see much increased heights and the portion of the community that doesn't want to see any increase whatsoever. And frankly, 130 feet is a 55% increase over current levels. That's a radical change. And if these DAs that propose much higher than that weren't being heard, people would be going wild that we were talking about going 55% up. There are people in the community who say, oh, let's study all possibilities. Well, why not 40 stories? Why not 50 stories? I don't find that argument very persuasive. And for the folks who say we should study higher than this, but we can always approve something much less, if we go ahead and study 200 or 300 feet and include that in our final plan, what's going to happen then is the expectation is that that's going to be okay for height, and the discussion is only aesthetics, massing, and community benefits. And I don't think we want to set ourselves up for that sort of dynamic. Those sort of much larger projects, because they are so much more extraordinarily bigger, really should be considered on their own by themselves for that reason that we don't want to create these expectations. They really have to be judged on their own by what particular benefits there might be for them. And I think if there is a plan for the downtown that has 300 feet buildings, it's going to bring a referendum. It's probably going to bring a referendum. It's probably going to bring an initiative like an Encinitas that takes away planning from the city process and does planning by ballot box, and probably will do some recalls. I don't know that it'll all pass, but I think there's enough people in the community that would challenge them that they would qualify for the ballot. So, I mean, I was there in '94 on the Civic Center specific plan. We got 17,000 signatures in 22 days for petitions to challenge that sort of plan. And then finally, when we're talking about these projects that are 300 feet high, we're not talking about transit-oriented development. We're not talking about dealing with climate change. $3 to $5 million condos, that's not urban infill that's going to deal with climate change. So shifting from that, on the heights closer to the freeway, I want to remind folks that many of us are Southsiders from Ocean Park, and that there are people for who the views looking northward towards those buildings matter. I don't think we can just say they're away from everybody. There's going to be the view from Tongva Park. There's going to be the view for the tens of thousands that come up Main Street and 4th Street all the time, leaving the beach. So just want to put in a reminder on that. I do like the idea of at least thinking about lower FAR for some of the opportunity sites, because at least to look at it, because in some ways we could get iconic buildings.
I have a question.
Thanks.
Can you please finish that thought?
Yeah, that I think in some ways we can get iconic buildings that don't max out on the site because there's less FAR, but still give us something nice there. I think we should at least be looking at that.
So, okay, if I can follow up
sorry,
just on that, sorry. So are you saying that perhaps the bonus, let's just say the new bonus that is being proposed in the supplemental to City Council is not important or necessary in your view, or are you saying forget about that for the moment, at whatever the FARs are being presented, look at various FARs up to that point, or just a lower FAR overall?
It's really interesting that the reason why I think it's important to kind of study both is I think to some degree it may inform the DAs. There are places closer to the freeway where, like Mr. Koenig is talking about, that we want to have density, we want to have housing, and I think some of these bonuses make sense. At the same time, when we're looking along Ocean Avenue and we're saying we want iconic buildings, but maybe not necessarily with the existing FAR that makes it go to 20, 25 stories. So how do you get an iconic building that doesn't go 25 stories? Well, you do it by having less FAR there. They build something cool. It doesn't max out the site. So I think both need to be possible in the downtown. And if we study both options, then I think we can inform the density that we should have. So I'm not saying don't look at those bonuses. I think staff makes sense to study those. But I also think understanding what a lower FAR might do for us on the 2nd and Santa Monica site, or on the Miramar site. I think both of those are things that we'd want to have in our toolbox later to analyze.
Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Thanks.
So when you say looking at the lower FARs, I'm sorry, you mean, so for instance, we would say a height of 130 and an FAR not of 5.0 but of 3.0. Is that what you're talking about?
I think it's worth looking at, yes, I think it's worth looking at both of those, because I think as Commissioner McKinnon talked about, it's right, it would change the property values, the expectations would be different, and I think in the site that we're calling the Geary site, we could get a really cool building that doesn't build to the sky like a Tower of Babel.
But I've seen some form-based planners talk about reducing FAR as you go up in height. I mean, is that really what you're talking about, that as the height grows, the FAR reduces?
I personally am not comfortable going higher than what the staff is recommending, and I just think on those sites, if we had less FAR, if we had studied less FAR for certain sites that we want to get iconic buildings, that lesser FAR for those kind of sites could incentivize those kind of buildings while retaining the scale that staff rightly talked about before as a goal of this, about keeping a relative same scale that we have today.
Okay.
So when you talk about the scale we have today, we do have these buildings on Ocean Avenue, I mean these enormous buildings, a few of them, that are not iconic in any sense, right, and don't really help Ocean Avenue. And they just sit there like big blocks. I mean, the thing that I wonder is whether having something that was actually elegant and not like that would, and I'm not saying a row of them, but something could make that better.
It's certainly a challenge to try and get something that's architecturally better there. We're all grappling with all these planning tools, but there is a point of no return, I believe, for us, that if we end up going with too many more supersized buildings, the Ocean Avenue will be compromised. And I think in the next loose, what will happen is there'll be 6 or 7 more opportunity sites, and what we'll be committing to is a 50-year vision where downtown Santa Monica becomes a series that has many 20 to 25 story buildings. And I think that kind of urban, quote, infill belongs downtown, those kind of levels, not down here. I think
downtown Los Angeles.
Downtown Los Angeles, right. I think we can have an ecologically oriented, transit-oriented downtown Santa Monica with a lot of density that doesn't go super high.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.